Welcome to today's episode of the Oyster Stew Podcast, where we break down the complex challenges facing financial services firms and provide expert insights to help you navigate them. I'm Libby Hall, Director of Communications for Oyster Consulting. In this episode, we're diving into compliance and operational outsourcing, when it makes sense, how it can enhance efficiency, and what firms should consider before making a decision. Our panel of experts, Sarah Sutton, Candy Palugi, Evan Rosser, Jay Donlin, Fred Wagstaff, and Jeff Wilk will share real-world perspectives on how outsourcing can help your firm stay focused on growth while ensuring you meet your compliance and operational obligations. Whether you're evaluating an outsourced CCO, looking for interim compliance support, or considering vendor selection assistance, this episode will provide practical insights to help you make informed decisions. Let's get started. Sarah, we serve as outsourced CCOs for many firms. In your experience, what are the factors that firms should consider when deciding to outsource this type of function?
So some of the factors that a firm should consider when looking to outsource the CCO role, there can be many, but some of the, I think probably top of mind issues are, does it make sense? And so when you're looking at that, it's different for every firm. I don't think there's a perfect formula that you can kind of plug in. It's more of what makes sense for the particular firm. So one of the things they can look at is with their current staff, with the CEO, the other additional staff that they have, that they could, allocate the CCO role to or have them, assist with is, how comfortable do they feel in the role? Do they have the experience, the expertise? Have they done it before? Have they worked in a compliance role or been in a compliance department or been in the financial industry? And it's really about feeling comfortable is half the battle, right? So by having current staff that have the experience and know-how or have experience in a compliance role, that'll help you and the leadership of the firm feel more comfortable with having them carry the title as CCO. So one of the things too to consider is if you're looking through all the tasks that a CCO would need to do on a monthly, quarterly, annual, and even a daily basis, it's what things are you looking to outsource? Do you need compliance support? Do you really fully need that CCO title to be held outside of the firm? So one of the things that I recommend is just looking at your compliance calendar if you have one, and just kind of putting a checkbox next to the things that you would like someone else to do, or maybe you don't have someone with the type of experience at the firm and you're looking for some additional help. After you go through your list, comprehensive as it may be, if large majority, like say 70-80% of those items have a check mark next to it, you probably want to look at outsourcing that CCO role, maybe just to the interim. Other things you need to take in consideration are the complexity of the firm's practice for the advisors that are there. What type of products are you offering? Do you have a specialty that you have to have additional supervision or level of expertise that's needed? But definitely the number of advisors and the complexity of the firm should be taken into consideration. Now, I do know that cost is a lot of the time a factor that firms look at when they're looking at outsourcing the CCO versus having someone internally. So that's definitely something that's top of mind for everyone. But one of the considerations that every firm should look at is take cost out of the picture for just a second. I know sometimes that's hard to do, but really look at, again, do you have the expertise of the staff? And do you feel comfortable with having someone internal for that role? If you're not a larger firm with a large number of advisors yet, does it make more sense to have it outsourced where you have an experienced individual that can hold title as CCO and can help train, grow with you as you need it, and really just help kind of guide you through the compliance area of the business until it's time to reevaluate and see if it's time to change the structure and have someone hired internally.
The considerations for outsourcing the CCO role may be different for an existing firm versus a firm that's just starting out. What would you say are some of the advantages of an outsourced CCO in place as you launch your firm? Candy?
I think as you're launching a firm, that's an excellent time to have an outsourced CCO. Consulting firms like Oyster can provide valuable experience and resources to help a new firm put together an effective compliance program, including putting together a compliance manual, the proper disclosures that are required, privacy policies, business continuity plans. If you're starting a new firm, sometimes you don't know what comes next. So you need experts to guide you and tell you what you need, so you don't miss any of those critical parts of setting your firm up correctly. Oyster also has a team of professionals to support the effort. So if we, come across something that the one CCO in particular who's hired for that firm, hasn't had experience with, we have a team behind us to help us out, give us information, as well as partners that we can recommend if we think the firm needs them. It also provides a period of time for the owners and the advisors to learn the compliance aspect and what the regulators expect of the firm. They will participate hand in hand with the outsourced CCO in setting up and following through a compliance calendar, say for the first months or years, which will build their experience. And they'll have someone there to clarify each requirement, if necessary, what is required for their firm, what's relevant, what's not relevant. I think altogether, really just giving them that support system and having someone to make sure they get started on the right foot is the biggest benefit from having an outsourced CCO when you're launching.
Candy, for small firms where the founders are primarily focused on growth and revenue, how can outsourcing the chief compliance officer role help them establish a strong compliance program?
So often we find that the small firms start up just by an advisor going out on their own, maybe just a one-man shop or a few together setting up a firm. So compliance isn't their strength to begin with. They're more sales, revenue driven, growing their business. Although, yes, they can be compliant, they've had others to guide them in their compliance. So I think that's probably the main factor is just not having the experience in compliance and understanding all the different aspects and what it takes really to set up a good compliance program. The other thing is having the time to devote to staying abreast of the current regulatory environment, new initiatives, new rules, watching out for new guidance published by regulators. And oftentimes they may get wrapped up in running the firm, from the sales perspective, from recruiting and all of those areas to where there's no time left to really focus on what's happening regulatory wise. So they can get in trouble with a lot of that if they're not on top of a new rule or if something's changed and they haven't addressed it. And sometimes they may not find out until they get an exam and a regulator points it out. We often find that advisors don't know that they aren't in compliance on certain things. Like they may not realize if it's an RIA firm that they need to do an annual review and actually put that to paper, things like that. So a lot of times we find that the CEO, if you're being the CEO and the CCO, you may be spread too thin. I think ultimately is the result of that, as well as not having the experience.
We've talked a lot about the outsourced CCO function on this podcast. And before we wrap up, are there other situations where a compliance consultant can help a firm?
Absolutely. Handling a new member application is so much more efficient and timely if someone with experience in that process is managing it. They learn a lot, with each one that they do, so that's very beneficial to the next one. Consultants can also be helpful with routine testing, like annual AML reviews, 3120, 3130 reviews, RIA annual reviews. Sometimes firms don't have the bandwidth to manage those, and consulting can help with that. Just seeking perspective on how other firms are approaching a new rule or a new problem, say with Reg BI, things like that. We have the luxury as being a team of consultants to learn what's happening in the industry. What are we seeing as a common finding with regulators or things like that. So we can offer solutions if a new rule comes up or there are rule changes, or if the firm just has a specific issue that they would like some assistance with. Sometimes also firms will use consultants to validate that something is working that they've put in place or it isn't working. They may want us to review a specific process or provide advice and guidance on that one process as to how they can better it, or do we think it's sufficient. Consulting can also help if firms are just looking at making a big change, like if they're looking at changing clearing firms or a major operational process, and they just need someone to help them analyze it and lay out the pros and cons and make a good informed decision. I think consulting can be very beneficial in that aspect too.
Okay, let's talk about resources. Recently, there's been a lot of turnover in the compliance part of our industry. Evan, how can firms take advantage of outside resources for their compliance projects?
Anytime you do a review or testing of your program, it should be conflict-free. Some rules require it. AML 3310, FINRA's 3310 AML rule requires a level of independence in that testing. People involved in the AML program can't be involved in that. And even in some of its, in the supervision rule, that testing of internal systems, branches, OSJs, needs to be conflict-free. Now, it doesn't specify exactly what that would be, but it only makes sense that to get a good perspective, a good review of your programs, both compliance and supervisory, that review is done by people who don't have any conflicts in that process and can look at it fresh. And in a number of instances, that's what new CCOs, new CEOs are looking for when they join a firm.
CCOs, especially at the smaller or mid-sized firms, are often working at or even over capacity. So it makes sense from a resources standpoint that smaller or maybe mid-sized firms will outsource their testing and review projects. When does it make sense for a larger firm to use an outside resource or an outside consulting firm?
Yeah, we have been called in to assist very large firms with large compliance departments. However, they simply don't have the extra staff for a special project. They need some assistance on special projects, a new initiative, a new regulation, that they simply just can't bring people on board to do. And we've done that, both bringing some specialized expertise and some independence and putting something together and helping firms put that in place.
Evan, you mentioned the importance of a risk assessment. What are some other types of testing and reviews that could benefit from an independent point of view?
Well, I can address where independence is very important for a number of reasons. And that was assisting firms with the Form CRS and Reg BI. And in doing both of those documents with firms, we found potential conflicts that the firm never recognized. Having someone independent to come in and look at revenue streams and incentives and compensation arrangements, we identified conflicts that we found were material to customers and should be in the Reg BI, should be reflected in the Form CRS, but the firm did not recognize. And we identified those for a number of firms and made sure they were included. And I know we talk a lot about regulators and making sure that we pass regulatory muster, but when it comes to Form CRS, when it comes to Reg BI, the concern comes also from your customers and your clients. Because if you have a customer complaint, if you have a client complaint, the first document they will review, the first document you will hear about from the customer or from, let's hope not the customer's lawyer, is your Reg BI disclosures were not complete. You didn't disclose this particular conflict. You didn't identify this issue in your CRS. So it's not just the regulators who will be reviewing those forms, but it's also your customers and clients, particularly those that may be dissatisfied or unhappy.
Like Evan said, considering all of the conflicts of interest, sometimes you are so close to the arrangements and the relationships in the firm's business that you fail to see some of these things. And having someone on the outside come in and take an independent review of that helps as well. When it comes to branch exams, I think this is where the expertise and the independent look from an outside firm could be very useful to a broker-dealer or an investment advisor. Sometimes, many times, inside branches, when your staff is overworked and, just the burdens are heavy for the things that need to be done, oftentimes I think the branch exams become a check the box kind of thing, or even if you're not anticipating having it as a check the box item, sometimes again you're so close to the business, to the people who are doing the business, that you think you understand everything that's going on in those branches. And so often an independent look into what really is going on can highlight things that maybe your management has not considered or didn't even realize was actually going on in the firm. Asking the right questions of the staff and everyone in the firm, observing what's going on, can sometimes open up conversations to bring out things that maybe management wasn't aware of, but it's very important to be aware of. I personally think the branch exam is one of the best resources a firm has, if it's utilized correctly, to be in compliant, to know what's going on. If you really use those branch exams to find out really what's going on, to educate the people in your branches, I think you are in a much better position to be compliant to the regulators.
There are some reviews that become very complicated and very extensive. And one such review is the annual review required by the market access rule, SEC Rule 15C35. That is applicable to any broker-dealer who provides direct market access to any of its customers or through its own proprietary trading. There are a lot of pieces to that rule, and it requires, the rule requires an annual review and an annual CEO certification that the system is working as designed and it's complying with the provisions of the rule. It's complicated, and it involves compliance, supervision, technology, finance, onboarding, and there are pieces of that some firms don't always consider. And that is a particular review that the regulators look to be a very thorough review. It is not going to be a simple review. Firms have tried that and they don't get away with it. And the certification has to be complete, and it must state that the system is working, that they are complying with the rule. This is not a reasonably designed standard in all respects. So it's just one of the specialized reviews that I think firms may not always understand the value of expertise. They may not appreciate the value of independence in conducting those reviews, because they are different. They are different both in scope and in thoroughness from, say, a 3120 review. That review is very prescribed in what needs to be done, and it is very helpful to have some outside expertise help you work through that review and make sure you're hitting all the right areas for review and surveillance.
Fred, let's turn to you. What are some of the key scenarios where outsourcing a FinOp or CFO role makes the most sense for a broker-dealer? And how can firms determine whether they should leverage an outsourced solution versus hiring an in-house person?
Oftentimes, firm may need to leverage the resources of a consulting firm because they don't have the capacity or they don't have the expertise or the experience needed for a particular finance function. Two very important functions within the broker-dealer space are the CFO and the financial and operations principal, also known as the FinOp position. The outsourced FinOp position, could make sense in certain situations, such as when training a new person internally that has their Series 27, which is the FinOp license, but they don't have the experience yet in that position. So that's kind of one. Two would be filling the role until a new person is hired. So they've got a vacancy and they need somebody to come in and fill the gap. that has the Series 27 license, until they get somebody in and hired and trained, right? There's also FinOp role does not require a full-time position. And that's, you see that in a lot of cases in smaller broker dealers where it doesn't take a full-time position to actually do the work for that. So that's where an outsourced FinOp could really make sense, because it's a lot cheaper to outsource that function than having a full-time position with the salary and benefits and all the other overhead expenses that go along with that. In the FinOp support group, that would encompass a lot of different situations, if you will, and that's not necessarily the normal monthly recurring, FinOp filing regulatory reports and that sort of thing, but would be, the firm's going through some type of a, business change. You have, systems conversion or an acquisition or just things like that, right? That where you have a need for somebody that has that expertise, to come in and help the FinOp staff or the accounting staff to go through that process and analyze the things that are needed for the different changes that are taking place from a finance perspective.
Let's shift gears to vendor selection. Jay, when clients come to us asking for help in selecting a custodian, can you talk about some of the decisions or some of the things that they need to look at? Not just cost, obviously, but what types of things would you help them do in the discovery process?
Yeah, we typically go to them and we document business requirements, wants, needs, wishes, that sort of thing. What they would need to basically have their business function the way they want it to function and be able to service their clients that want to be able to service, whether it be technology, whether it be product, capabilities, that sort of thing. What do they need from their custodian or clearing firm? And so we walk you through a decisioning process to ferret all that out. And then because of all the different firms we work with on the custodian and clearing side, we kind of can help you narrow it down to the ones you really should kind of talk to. And then we go through those conversations with you and let the firms pitch, the custodian or clearing firm, and help you with that decisioning process on how to select kind of the best clearing firm or custodian or combination thereof. Especially on the technology side, you need to be aware of, do I have the capability or the depth of knowledge in order to go down that path with technology and even manage my own technology stack? Do I have those staffing resources in place in my organization, or can I outsource that? Can I find somebody that can act in that capacity and can help me navigate kind of these waters? We help people navigate, custodial and clearing decisions every day. We do future operating models every day. So we can help build on that strategy side. But you also need to make sure you have the right people in place in your organization. Do you want to be the CEO, the CCO, the COO, and CFO, the one-man band that's having to do everything? Or do you have the right people in place so that you can focus on what's important? And maybe your most important thing is, I need to focus on my clients. And so you need to have staff positions in place or outsource those staff positions in place in order to free you up to meet your clients' needs. I remember there was a advisor that was at a wirehouse that was breaking away, and a client had called another advisor that was working at one of my firms, and he says, I was driving down the road and I saw my advisor out at a space, and he said, I'm breaking away and I'm here working with the contractor to build out the space and pick the colors and the carpet and all that. and so he called my advisor that was at our firm and said, hey, I want to move my account because this guy's going to be completely distracted. So he ended up getting the account because the other guy was breaking away, which was a good thing. I mean, he was trying to kind of get off on his own, but the client felt like he was going to be completely distracted with this quote new business that he was going to have to run. So it's a big challenge and a risk, to your organization if you're bogged down in all this stuff and don't have the capability of doing it.
Well, with so many critical decisions involved in selecting a custodian or a clearing firm, Jeff, how can firms apply that same outsourcing approach when it comes to selecting and managing other vendors for other services like technology or operations?
When you come down to looking at a vendor selection process, I generally say there's three different ways of looking at how you could benefit from using a firm like ours to help you in that process. And it comes down to like expertise, resources, independence. But let me focus on the expertise piece of it, particularly in the digital space with such a wide range of fintech solutions that are out there today. There's really no one organization that typically has all of the expertise in-house that can keep track of all of the different software providers, applications, and the integrations of those on an ongoing basis. Whereas when you work with a firm like Oyster, we've got that specialized depth of knowledge. We know the competition, we know the industry platforms that are out there. And to a large degree, we also know the principals at those firms as well. So we get a lot of insight. We have great connections that can actually help in the end negotiation process as well. I would wrap two terms together in terms of what you're looking for in making a good partner for an initiative such as these. An unbiased facilitator is what I would call it. Somebody who's unbiased in terms of their perspective, doesn't have any of the internal kind of swaying of one version versus another, one constituent versus another, but somebody who truly brings this unbiased industry perspective into the engagement, while at the same time helping to facilitate all of the different conversations internally, making sure everybody's voices get heard, the different perspectives, pros and cons are surfaced and debated as needed or necessary, and then ultimately bring it back down to that neutral party decision-making capability and serving all of that up to the organization who ultimately will make their final decision.
Thanks to all of you for your insights. We've covered a lot of ground on the benefits and key considerations of outsourcing critical functions like compliance, finance, and vendor selection. Whether you're a small firm just starting out or an established firm looking to streamline your operations, outsourcing can provide the flexibility and expertise needed to stay focused on your core business. If you found today's discussion helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes where we dive into industry strategies and best practices. For more information about our experts, visit our website at oysterllc.com. Thanks for listening.